Hi, everyone. 𝘦𝘹𝘦𝘠𝘪𝘵 here for CSM Practice, the customer success strategy firm. I'm super excited to have you today. A lot of customer success teams sometimes go from firefighting mode to actually needing to proactively pursue the commercial aspect of getting clients to be successful, to renew, to upsell, to ask for advocacy. But sometimes that transition from just being a firefighter to a truly mature customer success organization could be a little bit uncomfortable. I have Guy Galon with me today to share his framework and how he handled things when his team went from a firefighting, completely new customer success team to a fully mature team that handled renewals and upsell transactions comfortably. Guy, welcome to the show, and thanks for sharing your expertise with us today.
Thank you, Rit. It's great to be here again. Thank you for having me.
We'll start with, what is a mature customer success organization from your standpoint when you're talking about being mature in terms of commercial aspect of it? What is the holy grail here? What are we shooting for?
The maturity of the company that you work for, the maturity of the customer success organization, and eventually how it affects you as a CSM and how you become more mature. For the company maturity, the customer success maturity, I referenced some of the models that we have in the industry today. I was trying to understand how that model can impact or can reflect on the customer success manager and their maturity. And I kind of split my framework to 4 parts or the 4 stages. Let's call it the support stage, the onboarding stage, the adoption renewal stage, and revenue generation stage. And from here, I took one step at a time to explain to CSMs how they fit in this model and in every stage of this model.
Okay, so it sounds like in your experience, when you take a new customer success team, especially at a startup, mainly focused on handling technical support tickets, then after a few weeks, a few months, however, the next milestone in their evolution is sometimes giving them the responsibility to handle onboarding. Then they go into, okay, now we're also doing onboarding and technical support. And then as the team matures and the company grows, they also start handling adoption, renewals, and then eventually they truly become a revenue generator team. With that in mind, basically, what we're going to unfold in this episode is, how do you go through those life cycle stages, going from a firefighting technical support ticket resolution center to an onboarding team where you're a little bit more proactive, but maybe still reactive to customer requests, to actually handling adoption and renewals, and then being a revenue sender for the company. In your world, maybe you can share your story. How did you come up with this framework? And why did you bucket it in these 4 phases? And how do you think about these things?
I started my customer management career 21 years ago. Each time I was asking myself, how can I influence? How can I be close to the decision-making process? And doing support at certain times, firefighting, respond to customer tickets, managing project management, it's all good, but at some stage you want to raise your head up and say, what purpose does it serve? How do I contribute not just to my own organization, but to my customer success, and how that affects? That's 20 years ago, before we coined the term customer success or desired outcomes. And so that was the thing that was leading me throughout my career. And I gradually built those capabilities from one world to the next by challenging myself, not staying in the comfort zone and saying, okay, I want to get closer to the customer. I want to get closer to their challenges. And by doing that, I was feeling much more comfortable when you need to handle difficult situations. Let it be customer escalation, but sometimes it's also the commercials and how you get to the renewal and how you get to expansion. And so that's shortly about how I did it. Now, in terms of the framework, I have to give credit to Mr. 𝘦𝘹𝘦𝘠𝘪𝘦, who came up with the customer success maturity model for the CS teams. I asked him, is it okay to actually create the subset of this framework for the customer success maturity, because all the good ingredients and building blocks are there. Because if you don't have a customer success team, you don't have a role to do and you don't know what you need to do. Once you understand where your maturity is in terms of the customer success organization, it's much easier for you to understand what you need to do to grow with your team or even to grow professionally regardless. So that was the line of thinking that I had.
So I think the best way for those who listen to this episode to get the most out of this is to actually listen to Guy and how he unfolds every phase so that you can gauge where are you in the customer success maturity model that he's going to unfold. Are you in support, onboarding, revenue and adoption, or a true revenue generator center? Also, he's going to talk about how do you transition from one phase to another. Which customer success teams typically end up being in a support mode? Maybe you could speak about some of the characteristics of support phase for customer success teams.
So it starts usually with a small company. It could be 10, 20 people. You may be the first CSM, first support type of person that needs to take some of the load from the R&D and engineering, the team that are handling customer inquiries or customer issues. Maybe those customers don't pay. Maybe they're beta customers. And you need to run very fast. You need to learn the product. You need to be a one-stop shop for customers' inquiries and issues. Let's say a typical kind of CSM, maybe they call you CSM, but you're doing a lot of firefighting, and your main focus is to respond quickly to customer issues so they can continue and implement your product, which, as we said, may not be very mature at this stage.
Do you think that that's an appropriate stage for a customer success team when the company is this small?
I came across a few companies that I advised them that were asking me the same question. And I said, the first person should be support person, because if you don't have paying customers that either completed first onboarding or you need to onboard them and it's the first steps, then support person probably will be a better fit. Bringing the first CSM is when you have few customers that you are happy with you, they're paying, either they did the initial onboarding or they need someone to help them with the onboarding. And I think that will be a better timing to join. Still, I think at this stage, you will still be doing some firefighting, maybe not responding to support tickets, but you will still be doing some firefighting.
So if I'm a CEO, when would you advise me to start thinking about the CS team, not just as technical support, but actually graduate them into the onboarding phase?
When you have 5 to 10 customers that are willing to pay, hopefully your onboarding is quite simple. So maybe you manage to onboard them somehow, and then you have a pipeline of more customers coming, and you need to think about, okay, what's the next step? How I onboard quickly and how I start thinking about adoption. And if there is no one that is tasked or has a KPI to handle it, then it's not going to happen, and those customers will churn.
So once I approve the value proposition of my new company or my new software, and I'm a little bit more comfortable around maybe my ideal customer profile, and I'm starting to get some traction, now I'm ready to create a more proactive way for onboarding and create a process for that. I don't just have beta clients. That's when I need to start thinking about very least having an onboarding phase. And what is the shift in the mindset for the CS team at that moment?
So the shift from my perspective is when your focus is not just on technical matters, resolving issues, but also who are my customers, who is my stakeholder, what type of relationship can I build on top of the technical stuff, and maybe most important, what my customers are trying to achieve, which I think in firefighting mode, you're not thinking about it. You're thinking about solving a problem. In the next stage, you should think about relationship and about what are the objectives or the outcomes that my customer expected to achieve. So in the onboarding stage, the next stage is when I expect CSMs to understand what their customers are trying to achieve, which is one of the first things that we do as part of the onboarding, especially if your product is okay. There is some basic stuff works, but it still needs to grow and mature. Even more important, to make sure you're aligning what your product can do with what your customers are asking you or what their use case is.
What is the difference in the CSM interactions between onboarding and the support phases?
I would say they have very little proactive interaction with customers in the support stage because they mainly respond. And even they get back to a customer, it's usually to solve a certain problem, and they have less time or less bandwidth to think about the customer journey, which is, I think, the next stage. Yeah, it starts with onboarding, but you think about what happens the day after. The main difference is that you're proactively thinking about onboarding, what the process is, what I would like to achieve, how I measure myself. I would even think that even if it's an early stage of onboarding, obviously we want early time to value, so how quickly I can do it. So you're incorporating much more proactive thinking and approach in how you deal with your customers.
What about the commercial aspect? I mean, this whole maturity model is about eventually becoming revenue generating center for the company. What changes then? Do you see already like a little bit of a change from the support phase when you're in the onboarding phase as a CS team?
I think it's very marginal, so it's not much. And if you're following this model and you are the company that starts onboarding customers and you have few customers that are already there, okay, you think about the renewals. It's not that you're not thinking about it, but your main focus is how I do a good onboarding. I onboard as many customers as possible, meet some basic KPIs that will make the customers happy and get them start adopting the product properly. I would say your commercial, if we talk about renewals and upsells, comes a little bit later and less at this stage.
I want to double click on a point that you just made, which I think is really important. As an executive at the company, I need to think about changing the key performance indicators or metrics for the team. If in the first phase, I'm doubling down on response time and time for resolution and a complete resolution, in the onboarding phase, I can't use these same KPIs because I want to foster a different behavior.
You want to, as we said, time to value, how much I can create an effortless experience during onboarding, which is always, it could be problematic, especially for less mature companies. So that's something that I also think about. And generally being able to say, okay, the customer's objectives are such and such, are we able to meet them? And or their expectations are such and such, and can I meet them at the end of the onboarding? And by the way, another way to progress or evolve as part of the onboarding stage is start measuring customer satisfaction at the end of the onboarding and ask them, did we meet your objectives? Was it quick? Was it sort of effortless or not requiring so much effort from your side? So there is even room to grow or to mature within this stage as well.
If I'm a customer success executive, what are some tips that you can give me to make sure I am absolutely smashing this phase in a good way?
I think that you need to have some good understanding of what your product delivers, concept of ideal customer profile and what type of use cases your product supports, and try to build certain onboarding methodology around it. There are some solutions that will take 2 days to onboard. Some of them will take 2 months to onboard. Make sure you understand, or at least define for yourself, what is a reasonable time to do given the product capabilities, maturity, what type of use cases, and what customer needs to do. And again, the ideal customer profile. If I'm going to work with major tier 1 banks, it doesn't matter if it takes me 1 week, my effort. It could take 3 months until they get all the approvals. And the other way around is if I work with small, medium businesses that they have 1 or 2 people that I need to work with, I may finish everything within a couple of days. So I need also to realign myself on my environment and my technology and my processes to be able to at least start with a certain plan that I can say, okay, I can measure it and then iterate and improve as I go.
Just a recap, when you just start your new software company and you just have some beta clients, having customer success managers mainly handle support tickets and really learn from the clients as much as possible so that you can understand the value properly is critical. But once you have a sense of that and you get like a few customers and things are starting to build up, as an executive, you need to move the team to an onboarding phase. So I'm an executive at a software company. I just started it. I had some beta clients. I have a customer success team, but unfortunately, they're going to mainly do reactive technical support resolution and really adjust to whatever the clients want because we're still in a beta phase. It's a very early phase of the company. As soon as we're out of the beta phase and we feel more comfortable, we have more clients, we start having a sense of what is our ideal customer profile, we need to shift gears and move the team to an onboarding phase so that we can nail that first experience. When is it appropriate for me as a company owner, as an executive at a company, to transition the team from the onboarding maturity phase to adoption and renewals phase?
I don't think there is one point in time, but once you start getting a hopefully successful onboarding in place, it also depends how long your subscription is. So let's assume it's a 1-year subscription. We also say it's customer success. You cannot wait now 9 months for the renewal, especially when these are the first customers. So you need to already shift gears at that point in time where you have not just the ideal customer profile, but you see that the onboarding works well, more or less based on your plans. And then at least at this stage, you already need to have some kind of understanding of what your perception of ideal customer journey, what kind of milestones you want the customers to achieve, because otherwise you will just get to the renewal at some stage and then ask them, are you happy to renew? But Have they met certain internal KPIs of yours or some milestones that you agreed that will make sense to both sides to actually agree on renewal? So maybe not think about the negotiation side or pricing, but at least think about what will help you as a business to be there and gradually get the confidence for yourself and for your customer to talk about renewal.
What about the CSM focus? It shifts from onboarding to what?
It shifts for thinking about those milestones. Can I define how many users on board to my system, how much they use it, the concept of what is active user, which is maybe not that important during onboarding, but it's very much important later on. What type of features say they use? Are they going for the same use case built for them, or it's slightly changed? So those kind of things are important, plus having the communication with the customer and asking if anything has changed from their objectives point of view, introducing the QBRs, introducing those hopefully feature updates, and getting the feeling from customers that they not just use the product, but they think about it for their next stage or for their next challenges.
Would you recommend that at this point, they actually also own some of the commercial aspect of the renewals or the expansions?
Yeah, I think that if you have an experienced CSM, again, not 1 or 2 years old CSM, but someone that has a few more years of experience, and they know the product well, and they help you to build the onboarding properly, and they are maturing with your product and they're maturing with your customers, I would say give them the chance, and this is also where it goes to the commercial maturity of the CSM, give them the chance to follow this customer path or customer journey and be able to feel how customers are interacting with your product and how much value they get from it. And yeah, at this stage, you can definitely put some churn or retention KPIs, maybe not about the ARR aspects, but are you able to retain the customers? Hopefully ARR will follow, but this is something that I would definitely consider.
Any tips for executives or teams that are currently in this phase and want to move to the next phase of the customer success team maturity?
I would say definitely you need to know how to measure yourself as a business and measure the CSMs, measure the customer satisfaction as well. So at this stage, after you've gained some experience and your product is more mature and you're let's say in the renewal stage, I would expect that you have some type of customer satisfaction survey, maybe NPS, customer interviews, depending on the size. Maybe if you have thousands of customers, it's difficult, but if you're still in the stage where you know your customers very well and some of them are quite big, get the feedback and understand what's the level of satisfaction of your customers and what makes them stay with you and continue with you for the future. I mean, this would be at least one part of the framework. The other type of the framework is kind of consider already the tools and automation and start thinking about the future, because it goes well for you and customers expect you to evolve. You're not just expecting them to stay with you. They expect you to evolve. So what can you improve? Can you improve some of the things by creating some new dashboards, automated reports, automate some of the things in your product and connect and do some integration with customers' systems? Maybe think about already introducing a customer management tool depending on size and budget, maybe not immediately, but at least have it in your roadmap and something to plan for.
Got it. So at this stage, the adoption and renewals, you start thinking about things beyond onboarding. And you begin doing so in a proactive, consistent manner, start thinking about tools that you can incorporate into it, getting involved with the renewal sentiment and possibly with the renewal process itself, depending on the type of renewals you have. At what point do I become revenue generator team?
A couple of milestones that you need to hit. First one, from my perspective, is that you and the sales team are much more engaged. To be able to be a revenue generator, you're not just doing it in a void. You're doing it as part of the entire CRO team, the revenue team in your company. Some of it maybe the sales will do, bring in new logos, but they're still responsible for revenue from existing customers. The question is how you collaborate well with them and how they trust you and you trust them to be able to have this process in a way that, as I mentioned before, you enable the sale, do most of the groundwork. They can do what they need to do, which is a little bit more, from my perspective, more tactical, operational stuff, negotiation and contracts and so on. The other aspect on the CSM part, not just the company part, is that you as a CSM can say, do I know my sentiment of my customers for renewal and for expansions? When I'm being asked about forecast, about projection, I can actually explain what my customers are planning to do and give some projection. And at the same time, I can feel comfortable at this stage approaching a customer and asking them, let's say you're 6 months before, if we had to renew now, would you be renewing? or be more comfortable to lead a certain discussion, whatever discussion it is about value or features or functions or roadmap, and incorporate sentiment for renewal as part of this discussion. So I think those two aspects are a good indication that you as a CSM and the customer success team is geared towards revenue generation.
Got it. Does anything drastically change in the KPIs that I'm going to attach to the comp plan or my team performance reviews?
Yes, first of all, the organization, if this is the stage where you are and you want to nurture this kind of activity in the customer success, few things needs to change. So it's not just about retention. I would assume that this stage you are also measuring ARR per CSM. Comp plan, I would say possibly yes, CS management. Many of the CSM I met are a little bit nervous about comp plan and say, okay, 70 or 80% is basic, 20, 30% is based on performance. I would recommend to start with ARR targets. And for those CSMs that are very natural and very comfortable, maybe offer them some kind of a comp plan, but definitely not like a full sales comp plan.
What is the difference between a full sales comp plan and a CSM that's in?
I would say, first of all, the percentage. The maximum that I would do for CSM is like 80-20.
80% base, 20% variable. Once you go to the 30, you're in sales.
I think 30-35 is very much sales oriented. And I would split the answer here between the executive who's ever leading the CS and has a good understanding with the CEO about his targets, and generally the team, which I would say, if you do a comp plan, then not more than 80-20. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and we've done research, by the way. You could find the results of that research in our resource library on our website. And basically it says that on average, the split is about 83 to 16%. And that as soon as you cross over to 30-70, it's really teams that are reporting to the CRO and they're like pseudo CSMs, but really they're
account managers.
That's right. And I have a separate video about what is the difference between an account manager and a customer success manager. There's a huge difference. For those of you who don't know what are the differences, I actually recommend watching that video. All right. So we talked about the difference in the KPIs changes drastically, and the commercial mindset also changes drastically because now you're really putting a lot of emphasis in working with sales, making sure you understand the impact that you have with your client interactions on net retention rate. Obviously, customer satisfaction still is a big focus as well. We want to be customer centric. You start talking about scalability in the previous phase by investment in tools, standardizing operations. As a revenue generator, does anything change in terms of how you look at scalability, any new tools, any new perspectives around that?
I would say yes, because if you're growing and you have the hundreds or thousands of customers, then regardless of the commercial aspects, which are important, you have to be effective this way or the other way from all aspects, not just from a commercial aspect. And then it's not just about the customer management tool, which I would believe exists by this stage, but how you integrate with your product, how you make sure that all the usage statistics go into your customer management tool, and how you can implement maybe more sophisticated BI tools and dashboards that will help you as a CSM, but will also help the customer. And I think that's value proposition eventually is just making your product better. And then obviously the commercial discussions, your ability to kind of influence customer and be more confident about your capabilities, I think that comes as well at the same stage.
Any other tips for executives that are in this revenue generator phase of the customer success team maturity model?
At this stage, you should be able to have a relationship with C-level executives, or at least if you don't, then try to do that. We always say that in customer success, we want to have a seat at the table, but we always talk about the table of our own organization. But I want to encourage customer success executives to have a seat at the table of their customer. When the customer asks, what are my preferred vendors, they will talk about you and they will invite you to certain meetings, or they will call you if they need any help, which is over and above your product capabilities. Being the trusted advisor, but being the trusted advisor that has a good seat and a good location on the customer's table and on the customer's priorities. And I think that's what we should aim for.
All right. In looking back, if you could make some recommendations to yourself from thinking about this maturity model, and what would you tell yourself as you got started, or what tips do you have for those who just seeing this model for the first time and they're maybe just starting their CS executive career?
First of all, I would say this is more personal. You need to be curious. Don't take things for granted. Always ask questions first yourself, then your customer success organization, your customer success colleagues, your CEO. Challenge things. Don't stay in your comfort zone, because to be able to move from different stage, you have to be curious. You have to believe in yourself. You have to be confident. You have to gain the expertise, but you also need to understand that this is some journey that you need to take the same way as your customers take. So it's your professional journey. You own it. You can decide how you're going to do it. The more open you are to try new things, sometimes making mistakes, don't be afraid for making mistakes. Hopefully you're in the right environment that will help you to make mistakes, but learn from it. And then you will grow and take more and more challenges.
One big takeaway from this video is that it's okay if you're in the support phase or an onboarding phase. A lot of times we feel bad for being reactive or not being a complete revenue generator yet, but sometimes it's okay. It's appropriate to just be firefighter if you're like in a very, very early stage of a startup. So Guy, thank you so much for giving validation to certain teams. Now, should we aspire moving towards best in class? Obviously.
Of course, we want it.
Thank you so much, Guy. It's absolutely a pleasure always having you on the show. Go check out his other video with us. He's been absolutely fantastic in sharing his expertise and his framework. One of my favorite videos is how do you frame different role profiles for different CSMs that you should be having on your team. Everybody thinks that you should have this one job description and always hire for a specific talent, but actually you kind of like completely shatter that conception. And we talked about that during your video. So I highly recommend watching that. Guy, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ivit. My pleasure.
If you enjoyed this video, you enjoyed this conversation, please give this a like, subscribe to our podcast, CSM Practice, and I'll see you at the next video.